I would like us to jump right into it right now and just speak about what's happening, particularly in East Africa. We do have this, and I don't know if it's being too dramatic to call it energy wars, but what is happening right now on the East Coast when it comes to resources and just the dialogue that is happening, and again, talking to the issue of providing energy?
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for having me. In East Africa, as you say correctly, we have a lot of new developments in the area of energy. For a long time, Africa has looked at hydro as the source of electricity, a bit of diversification in countries like Kenya with geothermal. But in more recent days and actually months, the discovery of vast resources of natural gas from Mozambique, Tanzania, and crude oil in Uganda, prospects of crude oil in Kenya, Southern Sudan, that is changing the equation for East Africa energy.
But when we look at some of the countries that you've mentioned, and we talk about Sudan and South Sudan, we talk about Malawi and Tanzania, for instance, where you have that gas and oil exploration in the Lake of Malawi, and that seems to be something that, Tanzania, for instance, has already said that if that issue is not resolved, and if Malawi goes on and explores, and they've already given licenses to some companies, that dispute could escalate if significant gas and oil reserves are found. So when you look at it, yes, the resources are there, but some of the conflicts that are rising because of these resources, how do we manage that?
Yeah, I think that it all boils down to how that is managed on the political front, how that is managed with influence of development partners, technology providers. Africa depends a great deal on partnerships with the development partners from the West, the multinational companies. And I think the political side of it and the emotions that run when resources of this amount are discovered is bound to go down with the days ahead. I think the bigger thing is the optimism that this brings on the East Coast in terms of wealth for the people, and looking at the impact of those resources to healthcare and education, I think is a bigger goal that the African countries in the East must aspire to settle.
George, I would imagine that this must be something that investors are thinking about, even though we are seeing huge investment coming into exploring, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, whatever resource. A lot of money seems to be pouring in. But are there investors, do you think, that more could be coming in if there wasn't such caution on the kind of risk, because of there doesn't seem to be much stability?
I think there's a lot of interest from investors. Talking, for example, to the Ministry of Energy in Kenya, there is more and more companies coming in to inquire after available acreage. The same is happening in Uganda, the same is happening in Tanzania. So I do not think the investors have been dampened. There's a risk, of course, but I think the investors have an experience in markets, like in the western side of Africa. They've been volatile, but I think investment has found its feet. And these countries are exploiting their resources. I think the situation in East Africa is actually a lot better, in the sense that there are a lot of learnings to take from countries like Nigeria and Angola, that have dealt with both the resource availability as well as being shadowed by conflict. But I think they've managed to move ahead, not at the pace that everyone would like, but I think they've made tremendous progress. And investors have a key interest to come to this market. The other thing perhaps we would want to say is, in terms of the support from what we call the global community, the development partners, is that if you look at the growth in economies in the West, they are looking to Africa as the next frontier, to realize growth. And I think they'll help manage, they'll help the African partners manage their resources with appropriate technology and how to monetize this and change the fortunes of their people.
George, I want to talk about your company, General Electric, and just some of the opportunities that you're seeing in this space.
No, thank you. GE has been on the continent for a long time, actually for over 100 years. The first place that GE invested out of the US is actually in Africa, in South Africa then. And you know, between then and now, a lot has happened, and GE is involved right from the renewables energy. We have large wind power projects that are happening right now in East Africa that GE is supporting as a developer, as well as a technology provider. GE is involved a great deal in Southern Africa in monetizing what would otherwise be waste gases from steel mills, running those through the Njenga gas engines, and actually making the steel companies in South Africa, you know, fairly energy efficient. On the oil and gas front, GE is very well involved, supporting, you know, multinationals and international oil companies and local oil companies, national oil companies to monetize their hydrocarbon resources, you know, through our oil and gas technologies and solutions from subsea to power generation. So GE is very well entrenched on the continent, on the energy side. In Nigeria, earlier this year, signed an MOU with the Nigerian government to try and address the energy situation in Nigeria. And the commitment on that MOU is to collaborate with the Nigerian government to develop 10 gigawatt of electricity in the next 10 years. And that's huge, and a big commitment by GE, not just to Nigeria, but to the African continent.
Thank you so much for joining us, George. That was George Njenga. He's country executive for General Electric Energy.